And good morning, good evening, whatever time of day you're tuning in. This is the Suppress Herald podcast. It's Monday, December 1st. The Thanksgiving holiday's over. You'd think maybe the Suppress Herald propagandists would have taken the weekend off, maybe just stick to Thanksgiving. On Thanksgiving itself, they didn't publish a paper, and so they had the Thanksgiving fluff pieces and so forth. But by Sunday, after Thanksgiving, they were right back to it. And, they just can't help themselves. And then here on Monday morning, December 1st, they get right to it. Let's talk about the Suppress Herald, again owned by the National Distrust for Local News, which is owned by oligarchs, billionaire liberal supporting oligarchs. And they bought all these newspapers. They're buying newspapers across the country. And they bought but most of the newspapers in Maine and continue their propaganda, which is really what their intention is. Why would you pay money and keep these things afloat with continuing support? They're constantly begging for money. Word has it that the Suppress Herald is going to go to a digital only platform because they can't afford to distribute newspapers because they've alienated half the people that know it's nothing but a propaganda sheet. And they still haven't figured that out, even though people have tried to tell them that they can't let go of what they want to do, which is influence minds and influence the people to do the bidding of the liberal agenda. And that's all it is. It's called propaganda. And here on the editorial page of the Monday, December 1st, it doesn't take a genius to figure out what's going on. This is the editorial page. The first headline is Founding Documents Should Inspire Fresh Resolve. It doesn't really say anything as far as which side it's on. It just, at the end basically says, in doing so, we should find inspiration so as to dedicate ourselves to contributing to a new birth of freedom. It is altogether fitting and proper that we do this. I think that's what the MAGA movement is all about. I'm sure that's not what this is supposed to be targeted at, but they don't, this writer of this letter didn't actually specify exactly what he's talking about, just birth of freedom and the 250th anniversary. That's MAGA, freedom, as opposed to the liberals trying to run our lives, ruin our lives, flood our communities with illegals and ruin schools, ruin communities, and so forth. We'll talk more about that. Then you have the King headed down a disturbing path, as in Senator Angus King voting to end the shutdown and basically saying that he's just supporting the wrong side of this here. And Senator King has failed to resist the growing authoritarian methods of the administration that his Republican colleagues in the Senate enable. Blah, blah, blah. They have majorities. They won elections. That's what it's all about. Get back to truth. But King was supposed to keep the government shut down indefinitely and destroy people's lives and everything else, all on the case of continuing to massively fund and subsidize health insurance, which is a blatantly failed system. And then you have the best letter. This letter should not even be printed, but the propagandists were more than happy to. Comparison between Trump administration, Nazi regime is chilling. I am a 94-year-old Jewish American who still has fire left in the belly. I enlisted and served for 3.5 years in the United States Marine Corps. My father was born in Odessa, Ukraine, and my mother was born in a small village near Moscow. Well, this dickhead should know better than to recognize what communism is and what communism did to Russia and others. But When I see, hear, and read about the immigrant policy under the current presidential administration, it is without a doubt a carbon copy of Hitler's Mein Kampf. You know what you want to say to this? This is just absolute garbage. What we have is an invasion of our country, no different than if Russians had invaded Germany or vice versa, or anyone with an invasion. This is just an unarmed occupation of our country, if anybody is willing to look around. These are mass migration. They're coming in, they're setting up their own communities. You have the Somali community, you have the Muslim communities, you have all of these different communities. They're not assimilating into our country. They're setting up communities within our country and leading to nothing but division and mass problems and chaos. This guy is an ass, and his letter should never have been printed, but the Suppress Herald is more than happy to. And then, of course, you have a big editorial. Janet Mills would be an effective senator for all Mainers. Now, this gets published in the editorial section written by Christopher Barr, worked for over 12 years on the Democratic staff of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and lives in Yarmouth. A Democrat activist, written editorial supporting Mills against Senator Collins. And it's kind of interesting. The best legislators understand how to hold fast to their principles while finding room for compromise. The governor gets this more than anyone else in this race. How about Senator Collins? It's she compromises more than Republicans would like. Governor Mills has destroyed the state of Maine. We have budget problems. We have Chinese grow facilities all over the place run by the Chinese triads under her nose. Her own brother was a realtor selling houses to these Chinese nationals to set up these Chinese grow facilities in Maine and take over. Literally, there were hundreds of these grow houses, buying and renting houses and small commercial buildings and turning them into illegal grow facilities, all under her nose. First as Attorney General, now as governor. And yet, oh yeah, she'd be great. And that's the editorial page. All liberal, all the time. That's something you just never run out of at the Suppress Herald. Meanwhile, this is something that is over on the main wire, which actually does actual editorial or actual, reporting, actual journalism. Portland mayor warns city is running out of runway as homelessness crisis deepens. The mayor said this publicly, but nowhere in the Suppress Herald does this find its way into print. And of course, what they want is the city of Portland, run by all liberals all the time, like a lot of cities in America, run by radical liberal activists with their stupid liberal ideas, destroying cities and towns across the country. Defund the police, DEI, mass migration, welcome immigrants, overwhelm the systems, raise taxes, rent control. Now they're going to punish with fines storefront owners of buildings with empty storefronts. They drive out basically the retail and the restaurants out of downtown because of crime and needles and homelessness and dirty, filthy, and stupid policies. Now they're going to fine them because those spaces are empty. So they drive out their tenants, and now they're going to fine them for not having tenants. That's how liberals work. With a hammer. If you want to look at Nazis, that's who they are. That's how they run things when they get in charge. And here we have it. The mayor saying that we have a real problem, and he wants the state to take it on, of course. The city created their own mess, and now they want the state to step in and help pay for it in surrounding communities. Instead of admitting you made some mistakes and fixing them, they just want to spread the wealth, basically, or steal the wealth for their problems. It's just so typical. But it is not in the Suppress Herald. Oh no, we're not going to report on that. So let's go just one step further in the Sunday opinion page. That was Monday I was just sharing, which is all liberal all the time on the editorial page. This is the Sunday editorial, and it's, of course, right on schedule. Single payer health care strongly supported by Maine's medical community. Yeah, Maine's failed medical community where doctor bills and everything else. The medical community in Maine is pretty much run by Maine Health. They have consolidated, they've bought out all the practitioners, the regular primary care doctors' offices have been put in under the Maine Health umbrella. It's the same Maine Health that bought my doctor's practice, and then my doctor was no longer practicing medicine in a normal way. He was managing my health care, but he was not managing my health. And when I went in for my annual physical, and my doctor wasn't even there, it was going to be done by a nurse practitioner. That's when I walked out. I actually got dressed and walked out of the office and never went back. And that's because it's been taken over by bean counters and bureaucrats run our healthcare system. And what I did was I went to a new model here, and it's in Maine and other places, a completely separate from insurance and everything else primary care model where I pay $125 a month and I can go see my doctor anytime I want. And when I go see my doctor, I walk into my doctor's office and there's a waiting room and I sit down and she comes out from her office and she takes me into the examination room and she deals with me and she has her laptop and she puts in notes and she refers me. I'm going in for some cleanup knee surgery, a little minor surgery Wednesday. She referred me. My insurance picks that up. But she has zero administrative costs. She does it herself on her laptop. She does not have a receptionist. She does not have nurses. She's a doctor with me, the patient. What a amazing model that is. We should restructure our healthcare starting with that as its foundation. Get rid of all the regulations and all the requirements that add massive, massive billions and billions and billions of dollars to what we call healthcare. It's healthcare, but it's not managing health. But here you have it, single payer. Let's get single payer in Maine, which means you get rid of Medicaid, and you get rid of Medicare, and you get rid of everything else that has worked and basically take on a system that is confirmed that it doesn't work. You want a problem? Look at what happened to the Veterans Administration. Denied service, veterans dying because they're waiting for service. That's what you want to do, nationalize the Veterans Administration. Good luck with that. 100% of Americans forced into that, a disaster. And if you think it's going to cost less, you have another thing coming because the administrative cost to run a nationalized federal healthcare system is the complete opposite of what I said with a doctor and her patient in a space in her office. You're putting in 20 or 30 people to have that one visit at the doctor's office with a nationalized system. If you think that can possibly be more cost effective, I've got a bridge to sell you. So going on, We have just a few stories that we pulled out of the editorial board at the Suppress Herald on the Sunday paper. And this really, once again, tells you just what kind of propaganda we're dealing with. There was a big story here with six congressional or Senate Democrats came out and recorded a video basically telling the service members of the United States military to defy an order if it's illegal. That's a given. Everybody knows that. You're told that when you're recruited and when you're in the military and in your training, and everybody knows this. What this was a attempt to undermine the Trump administration and Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, with the military, to try to come between the military and its leadership. Period. Question your leaders, question your orders, and it's seditious. Period. Everybody knows it. But here's the propaganda that you have to get out there. Experts doubt Pentagon can punish Senator Kelly over the illegal orders video. Kind of interesting. And they say, this is the best part. The Pentagon's investigation of Senator Mark Kelly over a video that urges American troops to defy illegal orders has raised a slew of questions and some criticism from legal experts. Yeah, legal experts. Are those the same legal experts that we've been having overturned all these legal, you know, get Trump orders, the whole same legal experts that said Trump was did all these other illegal things that every one of them have been thrown out by the courts? Some say the Pentagon is misreading military law to go after Kelly as a retired Navy fighter pilot. Others say the Arizona Democrat cannot be prosecuted as a member of Congress. A group of former military prosecutors insists he did nothing wrong. Name them. I'd be willing to bet they don't even have a group of former military prosecutors. I'd be willing to bet they couldn't even produce the names. It was just written. This is, of course, the Associated Press. And then they do pull out Colby Vokey, a prominent civilian military lawyer and former military prosecutor, said Hegseth appears to be misreading the Uniform Code of Military Justice to justify the Kelly investigation. Vokey said Hegseth has personal jurisdiction over Kelly because Kelly is entitled to retirement pay, but Vokey said Hegseth lacks subject matter jurisdiction because Kelly made his statements as a senator. Kelly made his statements in the video as a former military naval officer. He actually was identified as a former Navy commander. He also was an astronaut. They used their former military or CIA, in one case, affiliation as justification for making that video. They leveraged being former military. He may be a senator now. He can be called back up and he can be court-martialed. And he should be. This is sedition. This is undermining the leadership of the military. This should have happened to Mark Milley, General Milley, who undermined Trump in his first term. This should have happened to many of these generals, undermining the President of the United States, who is the commander in chief. And it's time to make an example of these people. Because if we don't nip this in the bud, there will be no military order. And that is unconscionable. Going further into the Sunday paper, we always have to make sure that immigration, of course, I told you that, letter to the editor comparing Nazi Germany and rounding up Jews to rounding up illegal immigrants and deporting them. I think there's a difference. We're sending them home versus sending them to concentration camps where they're exterminated. Huh, maybe a little different there. They were trying to eliminate them, kill them all. Trump is simply rounding up mostly criminal, illegal immigrants and sending them home, giving them a nice ride, 3 squares a day, and sending them back where they came from. Here you have college freshmen deported flying home for Thanksgiving surprise despite court order. Concord, New Hampshire, a college freshman trying to fly from Boston to Texas to surprise her family for Thanksgiving was instead deported to Honduras in violation of a court order, according to her attorney. According to her attorney. Give it to you in a quick summary. This young woman was given a order of removal, actually went through legal process, and was ordered to be removed and sent home. And apparently, legal orders by the courts only matter in one direction. So here's the sob story. Again, sob stories of illegal immigrants. They've been given a legal order by the immigration judge of removal because she came illegally. They caught up with her when she went to fly from Boston to Texas, and instead of flying home to see friends, family, whatever, she got to fly home to where she was from. Sob stories, but they never put in the stories about the criminals, the murders, the rapes, and all the rest. Let's go on to, the anti-Semitism of our today's modern press. Palestinian death toll in Gaza surpasses 70,000, officials say. That's the best part. Officials say. And I love this. Basically, this is saying that the Palestinians and the Hamas are still under, assault by the Israelis. There's supposed to be a ceasefire. And if you believe any of that, if you believe the Hamas has totally given up and laid down their arms, I've got another bridge to sell you. Here's the best part. So, the headline, Palestinian death toll in Gaza surpasses 70,000, officials say. A hospital said an Israeli fire killed 2 children in the territory south. Again, hearsay. Here's the big kicker here. The health ministry says the Palestinian toll is now 70,100. The ministry operates under the Hamas-run government. It is staffed by medical professionals and maintains detailed records viewed as generally reliable by the international community. Yeah, we totally trust Hamas. I mean, they're the most honest group on the planet, right? Hamas has been lying and telling people that they were civilians. They're telling people that they weren't using civilians as human shields. And goes on and on and on. And it's all lies. But the suppressed Herald is more than happy to put that in and try to, again, make the Israelis look really bad when they're defending their troops and trying to reach peace. I guarantee you, if Hamas laid down their arms, there would be no more killing. It's always retaliation for when Hamas targets Israelis. And we'll move on to the really good last article in the Suppress Herald, which is pure propaganda bunk. This is good. This is in the Nation section of the Sunday paper. Trump officials and judge face off over flights to El Salvador in contempt probe. You may remember that Judge Boasberg from Washington tried to have a flight of illegal immigrants that were on their way to El Salvador to be put in a prison there. They were Trenda Aragua and MS-13 gang members, and he tried to have that flight turned around mid-flight. It had already left the United States. It was no longer in U.S. jurisdiction. He tried to force it back. Now he's trying to hold the Trump administration all the way to President Trump, if he can pull it off, in contempt for not turning that plane around and bringing those people back. Here's a couple of things with this. But an appeals court threw Boasberg's decision out. So his decision was that you can't deport these people. An appeals court overturned him. And the contempt probe appeared dead until, in yet another twist, the larger panel of judges on the same appeals court ruled on November 14th that the investigation could proceed on the contempt side. The underlying ruling that he couldn't deport those people was thrown out. But now he's going to try and get the Trump administration, anybody he can in the Trump administration, and pin them with contempt for overruling, not following his orders, which was a verbal order, never in writing. And the people, the pilots on that plane probably weren't even able to be reached, had to go through a whole process. But they're going to have a big deal about this. And Boasberg wants to start with written statements, and he's going to press this. Let me tell you what's really going on here. This is Judge Boasberg. You may recognize that name if you follow along with all these things going on. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Judge Boasberg was on the FISA court that allowed the FBI to spy on the Trump administration with illegally obtained FISA warrants using the known garbage Steele dossier as a basis for getting FISA warrants to spy on people in the orbit of Trump's campaign and later his administration. All of that, it's called the Russia collusion hoax, and Judge Boasberg signed off on helping the whole Russia collusion hoax. Now fast forward, Judge Boasberg also signed off on warrants for the FBI to spy on U.S. senators and congressmen, and then to have the phone companies that they were subpoenaing those records of senators, Republican senators and congressmen, also prohibiting those phone companies from sharing with those congressmen and senators that they had provided that data to Jack Smith. Judge Boasberg also, and it's funny, none of this is mentioned in this article, Judge Boasberg also has been impeached. Articles of impeachment have been taken out, and the House of Representatives will be taking up impeachment of Judge Boasberg. So why do you think he's so desperately trying to get at Trump's administration? And of course, that's where this article goes into. The White House has been hostile to judges that check its power. How about the other way around? The White House has been hostile to judges that undermine the rule of law and allowed illegal spying on the Trump administration and on U.S. Republican senators and congressmen. How about that should be in here, but is not? There is a deliberate effort to push the boundaries and try to curtail the authority of trial courts, said David Knoll, a Rutgers Law School professor who writes about the intersection of the law and politics. Knoll said he expects the Justice Department to fight the inquiry from the start with lots of appeals and chest thumping that Boasberg is exceeding his authority. Boasberg is trying to save his ass, and he should be going down for conspiracy and put in jail for the rest of his life. And hopefully he will. Of course, that same Professor Knoll, to finish out this article, Knoll, the Rutgers law professor, said if the inquiry moves ahead, it could influence public debate about whether the administration can carry out its mass deportation policy legally. A lot of a district court's power just comes from the ability to get an issue in front of the public, he said in a phone interview. In other words, it's not about the legality. These district courts overriding law, basically writing their own laws, activist judges. It's not about actually winning on the merits of the law. It's just shining light on policy. That's what you call an activist judge exceeding their legal authority, and every one of them should be removed, including Boasberg, who should be going to jail. So the propagandists continue in full force and effect. We've gone through Thanksgiving now. As we heat up and go into the 2026 election season, which will start in earnest right after the first of the year, look for the Suppress Herald to pull out all the stops, to be nothing but liberal hogwash, liberal propaganda, and spreading their lies far and wide. And as I've said many, many times, politics is local, and so is propaganda. So remember, your local newspaper and right up to the national news, they're all in one big business, advancing liberal ideology, and in this case, in the time we're in right now, crushing President Trump and all of his supporters.